Welcome to the Coyote Creek Watershed Tour. I'm so excited to share the beauty, wonder, and people who enjoy Coyote Creek in the southern San Francisco Bay Area. So, Coyote Valley feels like a separate world from Silicon Valley when you look at its rolling hills and hike its miles of trails. This open space is not only home to unique plants surviving in its serpentine soil, but also endemic birds that exist only in California. We're taking a look at some of the truly unique life forms that can be found in this vital stretch of open space in South San Jose. My name is Deb Kramer, Executive Director of Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful, and I'll be your moderator today. Being an outdoorsy person, I love nature. I hope by seeing Coyote Valley through our presenter's eyes, you can take in its beauty. This series and event is a joint effort with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. We will take questions from you. Simply type them in the chat section of Zoom and we'll pose them to the presenters. Let me now introduce our presenters. Our first one is Matthew Dodder. He's the Executive Director of the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and a lifelong evangelist of all things avian, sharing his appreciation of birds through teaching, art, and of course, birding. He'll share with us about the endemic species, especially the birds of Coyote Valley, a variety of habitats, riparian oak and savanna, and why Coyote Valley matters. Our next speaker is Craige Edgerton. Craige is a board member of Green Foothills and an active volunteer in the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. To add to his resume as a lifelong enthusiast of the outdoors and supportive environmental groups across Santa Clara Valley. He's not only involved with Green Foothills, but he's specifically interested in wildlife corridors and serpentine soil. He'll show you about Tulare Hill and the Bay checker spot butterfly. Let me take a moment to orient you to Coyote Creek. It starts in Henry Coe State Park, makes a backwards J through Anderson Lake, Coyote Valley, downtown San Jose, and Milpitas, and it ends in San Francisco Bay. At the yellow dot is where our presenters are, at the northern end of Coyote Valley.
Good morning, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Matthew Dodder. I'm the Executive Director of Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. And Coulter and I right now are at Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve, overlooking this beautiful Emerald Valley. In the background, we can see the sun coming up through the clouds. And I don't know how many birds we're actually going to be able to show you. There are a lot here. We're hearing many birds, but getting them into our scope and showing them to you live might be a challenge, but we'll do our best. In any case, let's walk over here a little bit and get a sense of where we are exactly. So we have the south end of the valley here behind me. And as I move around here, we can see the entrance road in the industrial section. We're coming over here and we're moving up north into the valley. And in the background, you'll see some steam. And in that area is Tulare Hill. So that's where Carolyn and Craig are right now. They're filming up there. So we're hearing all kinds of birds here. This is a very special place. It's very different from some of the other habitats along the Coyote Creek. We have a very hilly section here, a little bit drier, a lot of oak savanna. And down below us, there's some chaparral and some rocky outcroppings. And it's this diversity of habitat that really gets some great birds.
So what we have here, this wildlife linkage that we call, we don't really refer to it as a corridor anymore because people think of a hotel corridor. A wildlife linkage has been funded by the Open Space Authority, which is a public agency, and POST, the Peninsula Open Space Trust, which is a private nonprofit organization. And they have hired this company called Pathways for Wildlife. And they are a scientific research organization that goes out and using camera traps and tracking can determine what animals are moving through a certain area. And they'll set these a number of cameras out over an area and come back a couple of weeks later and take the little chip out. And they're motion activated cameras are what they are. So they'll take the chip out and then download it, and they can find out which animals are moving and what time of day, and a lot of data that comes from that. And so it's important that a lot of people think of these connectivity areas as just for large mammals, coyotes and bobcats and mountain lion and deer. But they also are important for birds to move back and forth between, so that's especially some of the smaller birds. And even certain plants that do migrate over time. They're much slower migration, but they do migrate through areas, and it's very important for them.
Northern flicker comes in several forms. The form we've got here has got red under its wings, so we call it the red shafted flicker. And it's calling kick, 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 kick. It sometimes does a really loud, explosive clear, which you can hear in the distance sometimes. We also have another woodpecker here called Acorn Woodpecker, which I heard a moment ago. They specialize in eating acorns, and they live in colonies. So they have 10, 15, 20 acorn woodpeckers in a colony, and they create what's called a granary, where they store their acorns in these beautiful oak trees. And they use those to feed them during the winter and in times where there's little other food. Below us, we've got the hillside here, and we've got white-breasted nuthatch, which is a small bird that superficially looks a little bit like a woodpecker, but it does an interesting thing. It always climbs downward on the surface of the trees, on the trunks of the trees. And if you think about it, a woodpecker only climbs up and faces up. So it is able to get to certain kinds of food on the top edge of bark. The nuthatch, on the other words, climbs downward and is able to get different kinds of food from different parts of the tree. A little bit smaller, it's completely unrelated to woodpeckers, but it does live in woodpecker holes. Around us right now, at least a moment ago, we had a western bluebird. There are a lot of those here. These are all indigenous species. They live here year round. Now, there's one special bird that we have in this area, which is endemic, which means it's found nowhere else in the world. That bird is called the yellow-billed magpie. And we had a few a little while ago along the road. It's a big relative of the crow, the raven, and the jay. It's black and white and brilliant iridescent green. And hopefully we'll be able to hear and see some of those a little while later. That is one of only 2 endemic species in California. It lives primarily in the Central Valley, but it's really fond of oak savanna. And we've got a lot of that here.
A little bit about the serpentine, the real poor soil. So here's a sample of what it looks like. Of course, it comes in much larger sizes, but this is easy to carry around. It's a greenish, it comes in a lot of different colors. Up here we have more greenish gray, and it's kind of a soft stone.
And serpentine is a type of soil, or the minerals that are contained within the soil. So this land used to be on the bottom of the ocean. And through plate tectonics and other geological processes, this has been lifted up off the bottom of the ocean floor. This soil is fairly toxic, has a lot of non-nutrient minerals in it. 1% of the California landmass is serpentine habitat, but about 12 to 15% of our native plants occur on that serpentine habitat. Because of the poor soil, these special plants have adapted to this very poor soil. Way back when, 100 years ago, nobody grazed cattle up here on Tulare Hill. There was very little grass because it wouldn't grow on this poor soil. But about in the 1930s or 40s, that area, grasses started to appear, and cattlemen started bringing their cows up to graze on it. What happened is we started polluting the air very seriously with our automobiles and power plants and just our lifestyle. And what that does is dump the equivalent of about 20 pounds of fertilizer per acre per year for the last 50 plus years. And so these invasive grasses that normally shouldn't grow here started growing here because of the fertilizer that we're adding to it. And Dr. Stuart Weiss was able to measure and record and see that these grasses were taking over the native plants. But he also noticed at the same time the cattlemen who had come up and were grazing the cows. In those areas where it was grazed by the cows, the plants were doing great. And so what we've discovered is that these cows are like big 24-hour lawnmowers, and they just eat the grass but leave the native plants alone. And so now this habitat is managed by using cattle. And hopefully someday we won't have air pollution and we won't need cows up here.
Okay, so we've moved downhill a little bit, and I like to think of we're sort of behaving like water right now. moving down from the hills and toward the valley. But right below me, we see the entrance road to the park. And along that road, that's one of the better places to see some of the birds we get here. For example, red-tailed hawk, common raven, American crow, western meadowlark. And I'm hearing western meadowlark here off to my left. It's a beautiful fluty song. I don't know if you could hear that, but it just called a moment ago. It's a really nice fluty song. Oh, and in the hill on the sky way over there, probably not capable of looking at it right now, but there's a white-tailed kite, one of our beautiful raptors, long pointed white wings and a white tail. There are a lot of them here. They love these nesting in these oak trees. And my guess is that they have a nest somewhere up on the hillside. But as I was saying, down below, along this entrance road, one of the best places to see yellow-billed magpie. So you could drive in, park in the lot down below, and look along those wires and see the yellow-billed magpie. Again, a very special endemic bird, found nowhere outside of California. Also, you'll see American kestrel, a small falcon, our smallest falcon, which, like woodpeckers and like nuthatches, likes to nest in trees. It's very unusual for falcons. Most falcons nest either on cliffs or in shallow cup nests. And that rocky outcropping is filled with chamois and artemisia and other kinds of scrubby plants. And it's the best place to find rock wren around here. So occasionally you can even hear it from up here. It has a really distinctive song. It says, "Takir, takir, takir." I just heard one a moment ago, actually. These trees right now are filled with yellow-rumped warblers. They're just about to leave the area. They don't breed here, but they spend the winter here. And just before they go, they acquire beautiful plumage. So for the most of the winter while they're here, they're rather drab looking, but right now they're pretty flashy. And when I see a turkey vulture way up in the sky above the hill, there's a California scrubjay, it's called.
So I mentioned earlier that science is the first step in protecting a piece of property. One of the next steps is to build public support for protecting an area. And this is where Green Foothills has done such an incredible job for the past 60 years. They're an advocacy organization, so they gather folks together, explain what the issue is, and get them to write to their politicians or to make comments where it's appropriate. So through this effort, based on the science, the public advocacy, and recently there was about 1,000 acres were purchased in the north end of Coyote Valley for permanent protection. You've all heard of the city of San Francisco, and they have this beautiful park called Golden Gate Park. It's world renowned. Well, I look at Coyote Valley as our Golden Gate Park of the future. Agriculture, maybe more trails, open area for people to ride bikes in and hike in. We even have Tulare elk on Coyote Ridge and have tried to come down into Coyote Valley, but they can't make it because of Highway 101. Someday, maybe we can get the Tulare elk in the winter to migrate down into the valley, and that would be a huge attraction.
So as we pan over here, we're going to see Tulare Hill in the distance again. And what I want to do is have Coulter focus the camera. That's chaparral. And that area is perfect for a number of birds. California thrasher, spotted towhee, and as I said before, rock wren. So another good place to look. We also get a great view of the sky here. I'm hearing a crow in the distance too. We have crows, American crows, and common ravens here. They look very similar at first because they're jet black. They're both in the same family of corvids, but the raven is about 40% larger and has a much deeper voice. And if we hear it, we'll point it out. But from this hillside, you have an excellent opportunity to look for birds of prey. As the air warms, some of these raptors will take flight. They kind of depend on the rising thermals to make them fly more easily. It wastes a lot of energy, a big raptor flapping its wings repeatedly. So hawks and vultures tend to rise and take flight later in the day. When it starts to warm up, when it gets to about 50, 55 degrees, we start seeing the vultures fly in circles, and we start seeing the hawks soaring overhead as they start their day. It's all about listening here. And since we're so far away from the road, It's a great place to listen to bird songs. Well, this hike up to this little hill took only about 10 minutes, maybe. It's a bit steep, but take it slowly and no problem. And while we were on our way up here, we heard a number of other birds that rattle through, just so you know that they're here. Ruby-crowned kinglets and acorn woodpeckers. We had yellow-rumped warblers. We had the red-tailed hawk, American crow, the common raven, Nuttall's woodpecker, rock wren. So there is quite a bit here, and it's very useful to get familiar with some of the songs. So it's a bit of a challenge, but with some experience, anybody can do it. Bring some binoculars when you come here, and a little snack when you get up to the top here. You're going to want it. So we took a little walk. We've come down another 50 feet or so from where we were a moment ago, and we get a different view of the valley. You can see the entrance road pretty clearly, or very clearly, and on the right-hand side, we have the chaparral. Behind me over here, we have a corral with horses and cows. And I forgot to mention before that this area is also really good for another very interesting bird. It's not an endemic, but it is a quasi-endemic. It's a Western specialty. It's called the Tricolor Blackbird. Now, you've probably seen red-winged blackbirds many times at marshes and ponds. The Tricolor Blackbird likes those same areas, but also loves farmland. So down here, one of the better places to see tricolored blackbirds in our county. Now they're all black, glossy black, just like the red-winged blackbird. They've got bright red epaulets, but they have a white margin on it, and that's where the tricolored name comes from.
Some of the birds that we see up here, which is really cool, we discovered about 8 years ago, burrowing owls migrate in the winter and will come up into this area. In fact, right over here in this set of rocks, we had a burrowing owl for about 3 years. It stayed in the exact same hole every year. But the last 2 years, it hadn't shown up, so we don't know what happened to it. And we have noticed that the owls are quite a bit less. There's an agency here that started banding the burrowing owls to find out where do they come from in the winter, because we weren't sure if they're coming from Mexico or Canada or they're local owls. So 2 years ago, they caught one owl and had a band on it, and we discovered that it actually came from Colombia. They're not known to generally migrate quite that far, but this one did. And it was a juvenile that had dispersed all the way down here. So in addition to the burrowing owls, we've done a lot of birds up here. We have tail hawk, golden eagles. We have ferruginous ospreys. In addition here, the serpentine habitat. Along the bottom here, we have Fisher Creek, and it's what's called a riparian area. That means the area along a creek or waterway. And we have a whole different set of birds that go down there. What's really cool about this, you've got a completely different habitat down below that you have up here on top.
Okay, so when Coulter and I moved the camera downhill a little bit, another 50 feet or so, we spotted this interesting tree trunk here. And wedged in here, right in this crack, you can see a bunch of acorns. And they're just kind of jammed in there. They're all pointing in one direction, but we suspect maybe they were placed here by a squirrel or maybe even a scrub jay. They like acorns too. But on the back side of this tree, go around here, we have something that looks a little bit more like possibly the work of a woodpecker. These holes here, these all look like the kinds of holes that acorn woodpecker makes. And right over here, in one specific hole here, there's an acorn jammed way in there. And that really does look like something an acorn woodpecker would do. So my guess is that when this tree was healthier and taller, there are probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of holes like this, each one with a woodpecker hole, with an acorn stuffed inside of it. Behind me is a beautiful oak tree. I don't know my trees all that well, but this is kind of looking like a black oak to me, and I'm sure somebody will correct me. But look at these beautiful leaves. They're just coming out. They're really young and they're really tender. and the tree is starting to flower. So these are all the flowers that will end up becoming acorns later. Right now, it's a beautiful tree, and a lot of the trees are bright yellowish green as they leaf up. It's a great time of year to be here. And a moment ago, I heard another bird, which is really characteristic here, called the oak titmouse. So you can guess why it likes it here. There's almost exclusively oaks here, all kinds, black, live, valley, blue. So lots of oak trees. Down below us also, there's a really small vernal pond. This pond will dry up in the summer, but it's got water in it right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if it attracts ducks here and there, and maybe even occasional shorebird. Killdeer would probably love that little pond where they could drink and lay their eggs somewhere in the drier sections around it.
Protection of this, I was up here about 5 years ago. I looked out over Coyote Valley and said, that will never be protected. It just is too expensive. And here we are 5 years later, and it is starting to become owned and permanently protected. So you never give up on something that you want to see get done.
So you might wonder, well, who owns Tulare Hill? It's not open to the public, and it's actually owned by 4 different agencies, all trying to protect the habitat. So the entire hill is currently protected, but it started with the Calpine power plant, the Metcalf Energy Center, that's down at the bottom of the hill. And through the research that Dr. Stuart Weiss had done on the bay checker spot butterfly, it was determined that this power plant, even though it was the cleanest power plant in the state of California at the time, was still emitting this nitrous oxide. And so he was able to prove to the regulatory agencies that this power plant could only be built if they mitigated to offset the damage that they were doing to the butterfly, which is Tulare Hill is right next to the power plant. And that land was donated to the Land Trust of Santa Clara Valley, who owns and manages this since 2003. So the land is owned by the Land Trust, owns a big section of it. PG&E has their power lines to go through the middle of the property, and County Parks owns another big section, and the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, which is another public agency, owns another section of it. And we're trying to coordinate all of those agencies into having a single management plan for that. But hopefully someday we will be able to take folks up there during the springtime to see the wildflowers and tell the story of the bay checker spot butterfly and other animals that are up here. It's actually kind of a funny story behind it. So an onion, the scientific name of an onion is an allium. This is a false onion. So if you spell the word allium backwards, you get muilla, which is a false onion.
But with the rock wren, you have a pretty good chance of seeing it when you come here. And like I said, knowing the call is pretty good. It says kind of a takir, 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 and sounds a little mechanical. So all in all, it seems like this place, with its diverse habitat and its rich farmland, the hillsides, the oak savanna, the variety of trees, beautiful variety of birds to be found here.
So I've been coming up here on Tulare Hill for about the last 16 years. I used to be the executive director of the Land Trust, and it was my job to manage this land. And every time I come up here, I find something new and interesting. It's like brand new each time. So I just discovered what I'm going to call the Jabba the Hutt rock. It looks kind of like the Jabba the Hutt Star Wars. Well, use your imagination, okay? Anyway, I thought it was kind of a cool little face that I found. Again, another piece of serpentine. Got a lot of coloring in it, a lot of different minerals and type of things. And I would love someday to be able to bring folks up here on a regular basis and show them that we're not quite there yet. Anyway, I hope you've kind of enjoyed this tour of Tulare Hill and Coyote Valley.
Thank you for joining us for the Coyote Creek Watershed Tour, where we looked at Coyote Valley's wonders. Please thank our presenters, Craige Edgerton from Green Foothills and his videographer, Carolyn Knight. Also, we thank Matthew Dodder from Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and his videographer, Coulter Cook. We hope you'll join us for another tour of the Coyote Creek Watershed.